The morning mist clung to the foothills like a spirit reluctant to leave the world of the living. Takashi Hideyoshi walked the mountain path alone, the familiar weight of his 2 swords at his hip and the less familiar weight of solitude on his shoulders. 5 years a ronin, masterless, purposeless, adrift in a land increasingly defined by allegiance and station. The weight of his past followed him like a shadow, stretching long in the dawn light. The path wound through ancient cedar trees, their massive trunks disappearing into the mist above. Birds called to one another, invisible messengers in the white void. Takashi had been traveling for 3 days since leaving the last village, where sake and a warm room had briefly held the cold at bay. Now he was bound for Mizumura, a mountain village known for its pure spring water and isolation from the conflicts that increasingly plagued the lowlands. As the path began to descend, the mist thinned, revealing glimpses of the valley below. Takashi paused, breathing in the cool mountain air. Despite everything, these moments of solitary beauty still reached something within him, something he had thought long dead. A maple leaf, brilliant red against the white backdrop, drifted down to land at his feet. He watched it fall, a small reminder that beauty and death walked hand in hand in this world. The distinct shape of a Torii gate emerged from the mist ahead, a simple wooden structure marking the boundary between the mundane world and the sacred space beyond. Takashi approached, prepared to offer a brief prayer for safe passage. It was a habit formed in childhood, maintained even as faith had abandoned him, or perhaps as he had abandoned it. But as he drew closer, the mist parted like a curtain, revealing a sight that stopped him cold. A girl hung from the crossbeam of the Torii, her body swaying gently in the morning breeze. She could not have been more than 16, dressed in a simple indigo kimono, her black hair falling around her face like a curtain. Beneath her dangling feet, barely touching the ground, was a wooden placard with characters brushed in a hasty hand. "The clan won't forgive." Takashi stood frozen, his hand instinctively moving to the hilt of his katana, though there was no enemy to fight. The girl's face was partially visible through her hair, eyes closed as if in sleep, lips slightly parted. She had not been dead long, the morning dew still clung to her kimono. Moving forward with measured steps, Takashi examined the scene. The rope was hemp common enough. The knot, however, was distinctive, a complex arrangement he recognized from his years of service. This was no simple village hanging. Someone with training had done this. A rustling sound from the bushes beside the path put him instantly on alert, his hand drawing his sword halfway from its scabbard. "Show yourself," he commanded, voice cutting through the silence. After a moment's hesitation, a small figure emerged, a boy no more than 12, thin-faced and wide-eyed with terror. His clothes marked him as a farmer's son, and his hands trembled as he raised them in supplication. "Please, Samurai-sama," the boy whispered, eyes darting between Takashi and the hanging girl. "I meant no disrespect, I was only watching." Takashi relaxed his grip on his sword, though he did not remove his hand from the hilt. "Watching what? What happened here?" The boy swallowed hard. I followed them when they brought Akemi-chan here before dawn. I hid and watched, though I was afraid." "Who brought her here?" "Men from the village, 4 of them led by Goro-san, the headman's nephew." The boy's eyes fell. "They said she had brought shame to the village and the clan would not forgive." "What clan?" Takashi asked sharply. "The Koda clan. They control this valley and 3 others." The boy hesitated, then added, "My name is Ichiro, Samurai-sama. Akemi was kind to me. She didn't deserve this." Takashi regarded the boy for a moment, then returned his attention to the hanging girl. With a swift, fluid movement, he drew his shorter sword and cut the rope with a single stroke. He caught the girl's body before it could fall to the ground, lowering it gently. "What are you doing?" Ichiro gasped, taking a step backward. "No one deserves to be displayed as a warning." Takashi replied simply, "Help me, boy. We will give her a proper burial." "But the headman, the clan," Ichiro's voice trembled, "are not here." Takashi fixed the boy with a steady gaze. "I am." Something in his tone seemed to steady the boy, who nodded once and came forward to help. Together they carried the girl's body into the forest, away from the path. Using Takashi's traveling knife, they dug a shallow grave beneath a maple tree. its leaves the same vibrant red as the one Takashi had observed earlier. As they worked, Takashi questioned the boy. "This village, Mizumura, is it much further?" "No, Samurai-sama, less than an hour's walk down this path." "And the Koda clan? They rule with a heavy hand." Ichiro looked nervous at the direct question, but answered nonetheless. "They provide protection from bandits and collect tribute in return. The headman, Takayama-san, ensures the village meets its obligations." "And what shame did this girl bring that warranted execution?" At this, the boy's eyes filled with tears. Akemi-chan was to be married to a Koda samurai, an arrangement made by the headman to curry favor with the clan. But she loved another, a young man from our village. And for this, she died. Takashi's voice remained calm, though a cold anger had begun to burn within him. The samurai found them together 3 nights ago. The young man, Kenji, was killed on the spot. Akemi was taken to the headman's house. Ichiro wiped at his eyes with a dirty sleeve. They said her disobedience dishonored the agreement between the village and the clan, that she had to be punished as a lesson. They finished the grave in silence, covering the girl's body with earth and marking the spot with stones. Takashi stood over the simple mound, thinking of another grave, another life cut short by the rigid codes of honor that governed their world. The memory was a physical pain, as fresh now as it had been 5 years ago. "What will you do now, Samurai-sama?" Ichiro asked quietly. Takashi considered the question. His original plan had been to pass through Mizumura, perhaps rest for a night before continuing his aimless journey. But the girl's face, peaceful in death, lingered in his mind. The sign, "The clan won't forgive," was not just a pronouncement of her fate, but a warning to others. Such displays of power were familiar to him. He had once been the instrument of similar messages. "I will go to Mizumura," he said finally. "I still seek food and shelter after all." The boy looked relieved. "You're welcome to stay with my family. We have little, but we can offer a dry place to sleep in return for your protection." "Protection?" Takashi raised an eyebrow. "Do you anticipate danger, Ichiro?" The boy glanced back toward the Torii gate, now empty but no less ominous. "If anyone saw you cut her down, if they know I helped." Understanding dawned on Takashi. The boy had risked much by revealing himself, by helping bury the girl. "Lead the way," he said with a nod. "I accept your offer." As they descended the mountain path toward Mizumura, Takashi felt something shift within him, a purpose taking shape after years of emptiness. He had not saved the girl named Akemi, but perhaps there was still something to be done in this village living under the shadow of clan justice. If you're drawn into this tale of justice and courage in a remote mountain village, consider sharing it with others who appreciate stories where honor must be measured against compassion. The mist had cleared entirely by the time they reached the outskirts of Mizumura, revealing a village nestled in a narrow valley beside a clear, fast-flowing stream. Rice paddies, carefully terraced on the gentler slopes, surrounded simple wooden houses with thatched roofs. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and the sound of children's laughter drifted on the morning air. To an outsider's eye, it might have appeared idyllic. But Takashi had lived too long, seen too much to be deceived by peaceful appearances. As they approached, he noted the villagers' reactions. The quick, wary glances at his swords, the mothers calling children inside, the men straightening their postures in attempted dignity while keeping their eyes downcast. This was a village accustomed to samurai presence, and not in a way that brought comfort. "My family's house is this way," Ichiro said, leading him down a narrow path between fields. "My father is Tadao the carpenter. Our home is small, but it's near the edge of the village." Takashi nodded, understanding the unspoken advantage, easier to come and go unobserved from the village periphery. The boy, despite his youth, thought strategically. They reached a modest dwelling set, slightly apart from the others, a small workshop attached to one side, where wooden beams and tools were visible. A middle-aged man was planing a piece of cedar, his movements precise and practiced. He looked up as they approached, his expression shifting from concentration to alarm at the sight of the armed samurai accompanying his son. "Ichiro, where have you been? Your mother has been—" He stopped mid-sentence, quickly setting down his tools and bowing low. "Forgive me, Samurai-sama. I did not expect my son to return with such distinguished company." "Father," Ichiro said, his voice steady despite the nervousness evident in his stance, "this is Takashi Hideyoshi-sama. He needs a place to rest on his journey. I offered our home." The carpenter's face revealed a flash of fear before he mastered it. "Of course. We are honored by your presence, Takashi-sama. Please, our home is yours for as long as you wish to stay." "I won't impose long," Takashi replied, bowing just enough to acknowledge the man's courtesy without diminishing his own status, a delicate balance he had learned through years at court before his fall from grace. "One night, perhaps two. I can compensate you for your hospitality." Relief flickered across Tadao's features. "No compensation is necessary, Samurai-sama. It is our duty and honor to provide for distinguished travelers." He glanced at his son, a question in his eyes. "Hideyoshi-sama helped me on the mountain path," Ichiro supplied vaguely. "I was fortunate to encounter him." Takashi noted the boy's discretion. He had not mentioned the girl or the burial, protecting both his father and himself from association with the act. Smart boy. A woman appeared in the doorway of the house, Ichiro's mother, her face lined with worry that only partially eased at the sight of her son. Like her husband, she quickly masked her concern in the presence of a samurai, bowing and murmuring appropriate welcomes. Within moments, Takashi found himself seated in the family's modest main room, a cup of tea placed before him with trembling hands. The hospitality was earnest if nervous, the family clearly unaccustomed to hosting someone of his status, but determined to observe proper etiquette. "Tell me of Mizumura," Takashi said, sipping the tea. It was weak, likely stretched to accommodate an unexpected guest, but hot and welcome after the morning's events. "I have heard it is known for its pure water." Tadao, kneeling across from him at a respectful distance, nodded eagerly. "Yes, Samurai-sama. Our spring is said to have healing properties. People from neighboring villages sometimes journey here to collect it, especially for the ill or elderly. And the village is under the protection of the Koda clan, I understand." A barely perceptible tension entered the carpenter's posture. "Yes. Lord Koda's fortress is a half-day's journey from here. His samurai patrol regularly to ensure our safety from bandits. A valuable service," Takashi observed neutrally, watching the man's reactions. "And what tribute does Lord Koda require in return for this protection?" "1/5 of our harvest, some crafted goods." Tadao hesitated, then added carefully, "and sometimes other arrangements are made for the benefit of both the village and the clan." "Other arrangements?" A look passed between husband and wife, a whole conversation contained in a glance. "Marriages, sometimes," Tadao said finally, "between village daughters and clan retainers. It is a great honor, of course." "Of course," Takashi echoed, setting down his cup. "I encountered something curious on my way here this morning. A Torii gate with no shrine behind it. Is there a story there?" Another charged silence fell over the room. Ichiro, who had been sitting quietly near his mother, tensed visibly. "An old shrine," Tadao said eventually. "The building was destroyed in a storm many years ago. We maintain the Torii out of respect for the kami, but have not had the resources to rebuild the shrine itself." It was a plausible explanation, and Takashi did not press further. The family had welcomed him despite their obvious fear. He would not repay their hospitality by forcing them to speak dangerous truths before they were ready. "I would like to see more of your village if someone could guide me," he said instead. "Perhaps Ichiro, if you can spare him from his duties." Relief washed over Tadao's face at the change of subject. "Of course, Samurai-sama. Ichiro knows Mizumura well. He would be honored to show you around." With that settled, Takashi was shown to a small side room where he could rest and refresh himself. The family had clearly vacated it for his use, a child's sleeping mat hastily removed, a small chest of belongings pushed aside. Another sacrifice made to accommodate the unexpected samurai visitor. As he knelt to arrange his few possessions, Takashi considered what he had learned and what remained unknown. A girl executed for refusing a political marriage. A clan that ruled through fear, thinly disguised as protection. A village caught in between, with no power to resist. It was not his concern, he reminded himself. He was Ronin, masterless, obligationless. The politics of remote mountain villages and minor clans were not his affair. He could rest here, perhaps enjoy a proper meal and be on his way tomorrow. Yet the image of the girl swaying beneath the Torii gate returned to him unbidden, the weight of her body as he'd lowered it to the ground. The simple marker stones over a grave that should never have been necessary. He had walked away from injustice before, telling himself it was not his battle to fight. The cost of that decision still haunted his dreams. Could he do so again? Takashi closed his eyes, feeling the familiar weight of his swords at his side, physical reminders of both his former status and his enduring skill. He had not drawn them in true combat for years, had avoided entanglements that might require their use against another human being. Yet this morning, he had cut down the girl without hesitation, a simple act of dignity for the dead, or the first step on a path he had long avoided. The village of Mizumura revealed itself gradually, as Ichiro led Takashi through its narrow paths and small gathering places. It was larger than it had appeared from a distance, perhaps 200 households arranged around the life-giving stream that gave the village its name. The water ran clear and cold from a spring higher in the mountains, channeled into irrigation for the rice fields, and collected in stone basins for household use. Villagers bowed deeply as Takashi passed, their expressions a mixture of fear and curiosity. A samurai visitor was clearly uncommon enough to cause a stir, but not so rare as to be unprecedented. Whispers followed in their wake, too soft to discern but unmistakable in their urgency. The headman's house, Ichiro said, pointing to a structure that stood apart from the others, larger and better constructed, with a small garden enclosed by a wooden fence. Takayama-san has led the village for nearly 20 years. Since the Koda clan extended their protection? Takashi asked casually. Ichiro nodded, then lowered his voice. His daughter was the first to marry into the clan. She lives at the fortress now. I've heard she never returns to visit. They continued their tour, passing a small marketplace where farmers and craftspeople displayed modest wares, vegetables, simple pottery, cloth woven from locally grown hemp. The activity seemed subdued, the transactions perfunctory, rather than the vibrant exchanges Takashi had observed in other villages. When do the Koda samurai next patrol? Takashi asked as they walked along the stream. They were here 3 days ago. Ichiro replied, keeping his eyes fixed ahead. They usually come every 10 days or so unless there's a reason for more frequent visits. Takashi understood what remained unspoken. The execution of the girl, Akemi, would likely bring them back sooner rather than later to ensure their message had been received and heeded. And the headman, is he well regarded by the villagers? Ichiro hesitated, clearly weighing the risks of honesty against the danger of being overheard. He ensures we meet our obligations to the clan, the boy said finally. That protects all of us. It was a diplomatic answer that told Takashi everything he needed to know. Fear, not respect, was the currency of power in Mizumura. They had reached the eastern edge of the village when Takashi noticed a small house set apart from the others, nearly hidden among a grove of bamboo. Unlike the other dwellings they had passed, this one showed signs of recent damage. A portion of the thatched roof had been burned, though the structure itself remained intact. What happened there? Takashi asked, nodding toward the isolated home. Ichiro's face paled slightly. That's where Kenji's family lived. His parents are gone. Fever took them last winter. He lived there alone. Kenji, the young man who was killed. The boy nodded, glancing around nervously before continuing. The night after it happened, someone set fire to the roof. Some say it was boys from the village seeking favor with the Koda clan. Others say it was the headman's nephew, Goro, making sure the disgrace was properly punished. And what do you say, Ichiro? I say Kenji was kind and hard-working. He made the best fishing nets in the village. The boy's voice had hardened. And Akemi loved him since they were children. Everyone knew it even before they were caught together. Takashi studied the damaged house thoughtfully. Does anyone live there now? No, Samurai-sama. The village considers it tainted by dishonor. A plan was beginning to form in Takashi's mind, not fully developed but taking shape nonetheless. "Show me this house," he instructed, already moving toward the bamboo grove. Ichiro followed reluctantly, his earlier bravery wavering at the prospect of approaching the site of such recent tragedy. "What do you seek there, Hideyoshi-sama?" "Understanding," Takashi replied simply. The house was small but had been well maintained before the recent attack. The interior was Spartan, a single room with a fire pit in the center, a sleeping area to one side, and fishing equipment neatly arranged along the walls. Someone had ransacked it after the fire, overturning the few possessions and scattering them about, an act of further desecration against the dead. Takashi moved through the space with quiet respect, noting signs of the life that had been lived here. A carving knife with a handle worn smooth by years of use. A ceramic cup, miraculously unbroken despite the chaos, decorated with a simple pattern of waves. A small wooden box containing a woman's comb, perhaps a keepsake of Kenji's mother, or a gift intended for Akimi. He was going to ask for her hand properly once he had saved enough, Ichiro said softly from the doorway where he had remained, unwilling to enter. But then the headman announced her betrothal to the Koda samurai. It was decided without her knowledge. And rather than accept this fate, she chose Kenji, Takashi murmured, more to himself than the boy. They were going to leave together that night. Someone betrayed them. Ichiro's voice caught. The samurai found them at their meeting place by the old shrine. The pieces were falling into place now. The shrine behind the Torii gate, abandoned by the village but a sanctuary for the young lovers. The site of their discovery transformed into the site of Akimi's execution. There was a cruel poetry to it that Takashi recognized all too well from his former life. "Ichiro," he said, turning to face the boy, "I will stay in this house tonight." The boy's eyes widened in shock. "But it's dishonored. And my parents have prepared a place for you. Thank your parents for their kindness. Tell them I prefer solitude to prepare for my journey." Takashi's tone was gentle but firm. "This house will suit me well." Understanding dawned slowly on Ichiro's face. "You're not just passing through, are you, Samurai-sama?" Takashi regarded the boy thoughtfully. There was perception beyond his years there, and a courage that deserved honesty in return. "Let us say I find myself curious about the relationship between Mizumura and the Koda clan." "That curiosity could be dangerous," Ichiro warned, surprising Takashi with his boldness. "For you and for anyone who helps you. That is why you will tell no one of our conversation, or of what we did this morning." Takashi moved to the doorway, placing a hand briefly on the boy's shoulder. "Go now. Return to your family. If anyone asks, you showed me the village as requested, and I chose to stay here out of eccentric samurai preference for solitude." Ichiro hesitated, then bowed deeply. "Be careful, Hideyoshi-sama. The Koda clan has many eyes in Mizumura." As the boy hurried away, Takashi turned back to the abandoned house. By choosing to stay here, he was making a statement, though one only he fully understood at present. He was aligning himself with the dishonored dead, placing himself outside the careful balance of power that kept Mizumura subservient to clan interests. It was a risky move, potentially drawing attention he might later wish to avoid. But something about this place, this situation, had awakened something long dormant within him. Not just compassion for the young lovers, but a sense of familiarity with their fate. They had defied the rigid structures of obligation and alliance, choosing personal loyalty over duty to family and clan. He had made a similar choice once, with consequences that had cost him everything. Takashi spent the remainder of the day making the abandoned house habitable. He repaired the worst of the fire damage with materials scavenged from the surrounding bamboo grove, cleared away the scattered debris, and established a small camp within the single room. It was work beneath a samurai's dignity, perhaps, but 5 years as Ronin had stripped away many such concerns. Survival required practical skills as much as martial ones. As dusk approached, he built a small fire in the central pit and prepared a simple meal from the provisions in his travel pack. The flames cast flickering shadows across the walls, bringing a semblance of life back to the empty dwelling. Takashi sat cross-legged beside the fire, his swords laid carefully beside him, and closed his eyes in meditation. The silence of the house was broken only by the occasional pop of burning wood and the distant sounds of village life, a child's laughter, the low murmur of conversation, the rhythmic chopping of vegetables for the evening meal, normal sounds that belied the undercurrent of fear and control he had sensed throughout Mizumura. His meditation was interrupted by a soft sound at the doorway, a deliberate scraping of sandal against wood, too careful to be accidental. Someone wanted him to know they were there. Takashi opened his eyes but did not reach for his swords. "Enter," he said simply. The reed mat covering the doorway parted, revealing an old woman bent with age but with clear, sharp eyes that assessed him without fear. She carried a covered basket, the scent of cooked food wafting from beneath its cloth covering. "Forgive the intrusion, Samurai-sama," she said, her voice stronger than her frail appearance suggested. "I heard a traveler had chosen to rest in my grandson's house. I brought food as any grandmother would." Understanding flashed through Takashi. "You are Kenji's grandmother." She nodded, entering without waiting for further invitation and setting the basket near the fire. "Harada Sachiko, my daughter and her husband, Kenji's parents, died last winter. I live with my younger son's family now." She settled herself across the fire from him with surprising grace for one so elderly. "They don't know I've come. They would forbid it, fearing association with dishonor." "Yet you came anyway," Takashi observed. "I am too old to fear anything but dying before seeing justice done." She began unpacking the basket, revealing rice balls, pickled vegetables, and a small pot of miso soup. "Eat. Samurai-sama, a man needs strength to face what lies ahead." Takashi accepted the food with a respectful nod. "You speak as if you know my intentions, Harada-san. I know you cut down Akimi's body and buried her properly. The boy, Ichiro, is not as discreet as he believes himself to be." Her weathered hands trembled slightly as she arranged the food. "Such an act speaks to your character. It was a simple courtesy to the dead, nothing more." "Is that what you tell yourself?" The old woman's gaze was penetrating. "A ronin who intervenes in clan matters for the sake of courtesy." Takashi paused, the rice ball halfway to his mouth. "How do you know I am ronin?" A small smile creased her face. "Your clothes are too fine for a common samurai, yet show signs of long travel. You wear 2 swords of exceptional quality, yet travel alone with no attendants, and there is a wariness in your eyes that comes only from great loss." She gestured to the food. "Eat. The rice grows cold." Takashi did as instructed, finding the simple meal far more flavorful than expected. They ate in silence for a time, the old woman seemingly content to wait for him to speak. "Tell me of your grandson," he said finally, "and of Akemi." Sachiko's face softened at the mention of the young couple. They grew up together, as children often do in small villages. Kenji was always serious, responsible beyond his years. His father taught him to make fishing nets, and he showed a natural talent for the work. Akemi was the headman's niece, his sister's child, bright and kind, with a laugh that could be heard across the village. "The headman's niece," Takashi repeated thoughtfully, "not his daughter." "No. Akemi came to live with the headman's family when she was 8, after her parents died of fever. The same fever that later took my daughter and her husband." Sachiko's eyes grew distant. The headman, Takayama, treated her well enough, as an obligation of kinship, not with true affection. When the opportunity came to improve his standing with the Koda clan through her marriage, he did not hesitate. "And Kenji?" They had been meeting in secret for over a year. I knew, though I pretended not to. What joy is there in youth if not the thrill of first love? Her voice caught. They were careful, discreet. But when Akemi's betrothal was announced at the spring festival, they grew desperate. They planned to leave together, to start a new life in a distant village. "But they were discovered," Takashi prompted gently. Sachiko nodded, her earlier composure cracking slightly. "Betrayed by someone they trusted. The Koda samurai, the very one Akemi was to marry, found them at their meeting place. He cut my grandson down without hesitation, without honor. Kenji was unarmed, barely 20 years of age. She drew a shuddering breath. Akemi was taken back to the headman's house. 3 days later, they hung her at the shrine where she had gone to meet my grandson, a warning to the village. The old woman's grief was palpable, filling the small room like smoke. Takashi remained silent, allowing her the dignity of her sorrow. "Why have you come to Mizumura, Takashi Hideyoshi?" she asked finally, her composure returning. "Truly." The direct question deserved a direct answer. "I was passing through," he said honestly. "I had no purpose beyond finding shelter for a night or two before continuing my journey. And now?" Takashi considered the question carefully. "Now, I find myself reluctant to leave matters as they are." "Because you have seen this before," Sachiko said, not a question but a statement of fact. The strong preying upon the weak, calling it protection, the sacrifice of innocence to appease powerful men. "Perhaps," Takashi admitted. "The Koda samurai who killed my grandson and arranged Akemi's execution, his name is Masahiro. He is Lord Koda's third son, ambitious and cruel." Sachiko began carefully repacking her basket. "He will return to Mizumura in 2 days' time with his men. They will expect to see Akemi's body still hanging as an example. When they discover she has been given a proper burial..." She let the implication hang in the air. "They will seek those responsible," Takashi finished for her. "Yes, and they will punish the village for this defiance, whether anyone here was involved or not." She rose with effort, leaning on the basket for support. "I am telling you this so you may be gone before they arrive. A lone Ronin, no matter how skilled, cannot stand against the Koda clan." Takashi rose as well, bowing deeply to the old woman. "Thank you for the meal, Harada-san, and for the warning." She studied his face for a long moment, as if searching for something there. "My grandson believed that love was worth risking everything, even his life." She moved to the door, then paused. "I wonder what you believe is worth such a risk, Ronin-sama." With that, she was gone, leaving Takashi alone with the fire and his thoughts. Her question lingered, impossible to dismiss. Once, he had known exactly what was worth dying for: his lord, his comrades, his honor as a samurai. But that certainty had been stripped from him along with his position and his name. For 5 years he had wandered without purpose, serving no one, believing in nothing. Until today, when he had cut down a girl he had never known from a Torii gate he had never expected to see. That simple act of compassion or defiance had set something in motion. The consequences would arrive in 2 days, with a man named Masahiro and his Koda warriors. Takashi could be gone by then, continuing his aimless journey, leaving Mizumura to face whatever punishment the clan deemed appropriate for the desecration of their warning. Or he could stay and... what? Fight? One Ronin against the warriors of the Koda clan? It would be suicide, and likely bring even greater suffering to the village. No. So if he stayed, he would need a different approach. Strategy, not just swordsmanship. Intelligence and timing, not just courage. Takashi added more wood to the fire, settling himself for a long night of planning. The path ahead was unclear, but for the first time in years he felt a sense of direction. Whatever came next, he would face it with a clear purpose, to ensure that the deaths of Kenji and Akemi would not simply be forgotten as another cruel necessity in the relentless machinery of power. If this tale of a solitary warrior finding renewed purpose stirs something in your heart, I hope you'll join me as our story continues through shadow and steel, toward an uncertain dawn. Morning brought a gentle rain to Mizumura, softening the edges of the village and muffling the sounds of daily life. Takashi rose before dawn, having slept little but with a clarity of mind he had not experienced in years. The previous night's meditation had yielded, if not a complete plan, then at least the beginnings of one. He moved through a series of kata, the formal exercises of swordsmanship, in the small clearing behind Kenji's house. His body remembered what his mind had tried to forget, flowing through the movements with fluid precision. Each stance, each strike a confirmation that despite his years of wandering, his skills remained. When he finished, he found Ichiro waiting at the edge of the clearing, a small bundle clutched in his hands, watching with undisguised admiration. "My mother sent food," the boy explained, holding out the package. "She said a guest shouldn't go hungry, even if he chooses not to stay under our roof." Takashi accepted the gift with a bow. "Your mother is kind. Thank your family for me." "I will." Ichiro hesitated, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "The village is talking about you, about why you're staying in Kenji's house. And what do they say? Some think you're a ghost hunter, come to cleanse the dishonor from the house so it can be used again. Others say you're from a rival clan, seeking weakness in Koda territory." The boy lowered his voice. "And some say you're here because of Akemi, though they don't know how you could have known her." Takashi considered this information. "People see what they expect to see, Ichiro, or what they fear to see. What should I tell them if they ask me directly? Tell them I am a traveler who prefers solitude, nothing more." Takashi placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "But I would ask a favor of you if you're willing." Ichiro straightened, clearly pleased to be entrusted with a task. "Anything, Hideyoshi-sama. I need to understand the layout of the headman's house, the number of guards, the daily routines. Can you gather this information without arousing suspicion?" The boy's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded without hesitation. "My cousin works in the kitchen there. She likes to talk, especially if I bring her sweet chestnuts from the grove by the stream." "Good." Takashi squeezed the boy's shoulder gently. "Be careful, Ichiro. Observe and listen, nothing more. I don't want you taking unnecessary risks." "I understand." Ichiro looked at Takashi with sudden seriousness. "You're going to do something about the Koda clan, aren't you? About what they did to Akemi and Kenji?" It wasn't really a question, and Takashi didn't treat it as one. "Go now," he said simply. "And remember, caution above all else." After the boy left, Takashi returned to the house, ate the simple breakfast Ichiro's mother had sent, and prepared for the day ahead. He dressed in his plainest clothes, leaving his formal hakama carefully folded. From his travel pack, he withdrew a small jar of dye, which he applied to his hair, turning the few strands of distinguishing grey to solid black. Small changes to his appearance, but enough to make him less immediately recognizable as the samurai who had arrived yesterday. Thus disguised, he made his way to the village center, moving with the hunched posture and careful steps of a man with a chronic injury, another deception he had employed before when wishing to appear less threatening. He carried only his shorter sword, tucked discreetly in his obi, leaving the longer katana hidden beneath the floorboards of Kenji's house. The marketplace was more active than the previous day, the rain having given way to misty sunshine. Takashi moved among the villagers, now just another visitor rather than an intimidating samurai. He purchased small items, dried persimmons, a whetstone, a packet of tea, using each transaction as an opportunity to engage the vendors in casual conversation. "Fine quality," he would say, examining a piece of cloth or a carved wooden bowl. "You have skilled craftspeople in Mizumura." "The best in the valley," came the proud reply from one Leith worker. "The Koda clan takes our goods for their fortress. Lord Koda himself uses our saddles." "Such an honor," Takashi murmured. "The clan must value Mizumura highly." "We provide what is required," the man answered, his initial pride fading to something more complex. "As is our duty." Through such conversations, carefully guided but never overtly probing, Takashi built a picture of Mizumura's relationship with the Koda clan. The pattern was clear. What had begun as genuine protection decades ago had gradually transformed into exploitation, thinly veiled as patronage. The village provided tribute in goods, food, and occasionally people, receiving in return the dubious benefit of not being raided by the very samurai who claimed to protect them. It was a story Takashi had seen unfold in other provinces, other villages. The strong imposing their will on the weak, cloaking oppression in the language of tradition and obligation. Once he had been part of such a system, believing in its necessity if not always its justice. Now, he saw it with different eyes. By midday, his wandering had brought him near the headman's house, a substantial building surrounded by a low wooden fence. Unlike the previous day, the gate stood open, and there seemed to be unusual activity within. Servants moved hurriedly about the courtyard, carrying linens and food stores, preparations for guests. Takashi surmised, likely Masahiro and his men arriving sooner than expected. He lingered near a food stall across from the headman's gate, pretending interest in the steamed buns while observing the commotion. The vendor, a heavy-set woman with sharp eyes, noted his attention. "Important visitors coming," she said, misinterpreting his interest. "The headman's been in a state since the messenger arrived this morning." "Oh," Takashi affected mild curiosity. "Someone from the capital, perhaps," the woman snorted. "From the Koda fortress. That young lord, the cruel one with the scarred cheek. He's coming tonight instead of tomorrow." She lowered her voice. "They say he's bringing twice the usual number of men. Something about a problem that needs addressing." Takashi felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. Masahiro had discovered Akimi's body was missing sooner than anticipated. The timeline had shortened dramatically. "Sounds ominous," he commented, paying for a bun he no longer had appetite for. "Perhaps a good night to stay indoors." "That's what I told my husband," the woman agreed. "No good comes from being noticed when the Koda clan is angry." Takashi thanked her and moved on, his mind racing through the implications of this new development. His nebulous plan had just become far more urgent and far more dangerous. He needed more information, and quickly. He found Ichiro waiting for him when he returned to Kenji's house, the boy's face taut with anxiety. "You've heard," Takashi said, reading the answer in the boy's expression. "They're coming tonight," Ichiro confirmed. "My cousin says the headman received a messenger at dawn. The samurai, Masahiro, he went to the Torii gate this morning and found Akemi's body missing. The boy swallowed hard. "He's bringing 10 warriors with him. They plan to take 5 villages as punishment, 1 for each year of tribute. The village still owes under their agreement." "Take them where?" "To the Koda fortress, to serve as examples." Ichiro's voice dropped to a whisper. "My cousin said they'll probably never return." Takashi absorbed this information in silence. The situation had escalated beyond what he had anticipated. Taking hostages was a common enough tactic among clans seeking to ensure compliance from their subjects, but the number suggested a disproportionate response. Masahiro was not simply enforcing order, he was making a statement about his personal authority. "Did your cousin mention anything about the layout of the headman's house, the guard rotations?" Ichiro nodded eagerly, some of his fear giving way to the pride of having completed his mission. 2 guards at the gate normally, though there will be more tonight. The headman's personal quarters are in the north wing, with a separate entrance from the garden. And the important thing, Masahiro always stays in the same guest room when he visits, in the east wing overlooking the pond. "My cousin says he's particular about it." "You've done well," Takashi said, genuinely impressed by the boy's thoroughness. "Now listen carefully. You must return home and stay there tonight. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you and your family must remain indoors with the shutters closed." "But I want to help," Ichiro protested. "You have helped," Takashi interrupted firmly. "More than you know, but what comes next is not for a boy to witness or participate in." He held the boy's gaze until understanding and reluctant acceptance dawned in his eyes. "Will you leave Mizumura after tonight?" Ichiro asked softly. "Once you've done whatever it is you're planning." The question caught Takashi off guard. He had been so focused on the immediate problem that he had not considered what would follow. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "Perhaps." Ichiro nodded, accepting this ambiguity with the resilience of youth. "I should go before my mother worries." He moved to the door, then turned back. "Be careful, Hideyoshi-sama. Masahiro is said to be the best swordsman among Lord Koda's sons." "I'll remember that," Takashi promised. After the boy left, Takashi unwrapped his swords and began the methodical process of preparing them for use. He removed the katana from its sheath, examining the blade for any imperfection, any spot of rust that might have formed during his years of wandering. The steel caught the afternoon light, reflecting it in a clean, pure line, a sword that had been cared for, even when its owner had neglected himself. He thought of Kenji, the young fisherman who had died for love of a girl promised to another. Unarmed, facing a trained samurai, knowing his death was certain. Had he regretted his choice in that final moment, or had he found peace in knowing he had lived according to his heart, even if only briefly? And Akemi, who had chosen love over obligation, personal loyalty over family alliance. Had she understood as she stood beneath the Torii gate with the rope around her neck that her death would be more than a personal tragedy, that it would become a symbol of the Koda clan's power over Mizumura? Takashi did not know. But as evening approached and he continued his preparations for the night ahead, he found himself hoping that somewhere, in whatever realm the dead inhabited, the young lovers had found each other again. It was a fanciful thought, perhaps unworthy of a samurai trained in practicality and purpose. But after 5 years of emptiness, Takashi found he preferred the comfort of fancy to the cold certainty of nothingness. The rain returned as darkness fell, a steady downpour that shrouded Mizumura in a veil of water and mist, perfect weather for what lay ahead. Takashi dressed with care, binding his hair tightly at the nape of his neck and wrapping his forearms in dark cloth to prevent the gleam of skin in moonlight. He wore no armor, it would only slow him down and create noise, but arranged his clothing for maximum freedom of movement. Both swords were secured at his hip, their hilts wrapped in cloth to dull any inadvertent reflection or sound. In a small pouch at his belt, he carried other items that might prove useful: thin cord, a few small river stones, a vial of oil. Before leaving Kenji's house, he knelt briefly in its center, offering a silent prayer, not to any specific deity, but to whatever forces might guide his hand this night. He did not pray for victory or even survival, but for clarity of purpose and the strength to see it through. Then he was moving, a shadow among shadows, making his way through the rain-soaked village toward the headman's compound. The streets were deserted, the inhabitants of Mizumura having retreated behind closed doors and shuttered windows. Even the dogs were silent, as if sensing that this night belonged to more dangerous predators. The Koda samurai had arrived as scheduled, their horses now tethered in the headman's stable, visible as Takashi circled the compound from a distance. He counted 11 mounts, Masahiro and his 10 warriors, exactly as Ichiro had reported. The main gate was now guarded by 4 men rather than the usual 2, their postures attentive despite the discomfort of the rain. Takashi had no intention of approaching through the gate. Instead, he made his way to the north side of the compound, where a small stream ran alongside the garden wall. The wall itself was not high, designed for privacy rather than defense, but would be watched more carefully tonight given the circumstances. Patience had never been Takashi's greatest virtue in his youth, but the years of solitude had taught him its value. He waited in the darkness, observing the pattern of the guards' movements along the wall. 2 men, walking in opposite directions, passing each other roughly every 10 minutes. Their rhythm was imperfect. One walked slightly faster than the other, and both were obviously eager to complete their circuits and return to shelter from the rain. When the moment was right, Takashi moved. Using a gnarled plum tree that extended its branches over the wall, he pulled himself up and over in one fluid motion, landing silently in the soft mud of the garden. He pressed himself into the shadow of a stone lantern, counting his heartbeats as the nearest guard passed within arm's reach, oblivious to the intruder in his lord's garden. From there, Takashi navigated the garden by memory, having studied its layout carefully during his observation. The headman's private entrance was just as Ichiro had described, a simple sliding door partially concealed by a stand of ornamental bamboo. It would be locked, of course, but such locks were designed to keep out ordinary thieves, not a determined and skilled infiltrator. Using the thin blade of his knife, Takashi defeated the simple mechanism in moments. He paused, listening for any sound from within, then slid the door open just enough to slip inside. He found himself in a narrow corridor lit by a single oil lamp, its flame turned low. To his right would be the headman's private chambers, to his left, the guest wing where Masahiro would be staying. He moved left, careful to place each foot soundlessly on the polished wooden floor. The house was not silent. From the main hall came the muffled sounds of men drinking, their voices raised in the particular way of warriors celebrating before action. Good. Distraction worked in his favor. The guest wing was separated from the main house by another short corridor, this one unlit. Takashi paused at its entrance, allowing his eyes to adjust to the deeper darkness. A guard sat at the far end, his head nodding slightly, still awake but drowsy, likely posted outside Masahiro's room. This would require precision. Takashi removed 2 small river stones from his pouch, weighing them in his palm. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he sent one flying through the open window to his right, where it landed with a soft splash in the garden pond. The guard's head jerked up, his hand moving to his sword hilt as he peered into the darkness of the corridor. After a moment's hesitation, he rose and moved cautiously toward the sound, passing Takashi's position without seeing the figure pressed into the shadow of a supporting beam. As the guard reached the window, Takashi struck, a single, precise blow to the back of the neck that rendered the man unconscious before he could make a sound. Takashi caught him as he fell, lowering the limp body silently to the floor. The guard would wake eventually with a severe headache, but no lasting damage. The path to Masahiro's room now clear, Takashi approached the sliding door with heightened caution. This was the moment of greatest risk, and the point of no return. Once he confronted the Koda samurai, there would be no possibility of retreat or anonymity. He listened at the door, hearing only the soft sounds of someone preparing for sleep, the rustle of fabric, the clink of a sword being placed on its stand, then silence, followed by the distinctive sound of a body settling onto a sleeping mat. Takashi waited, counting his breaths, giving Masahiro time to relax into the first stages of sleep. Then, with a swift, controlled motion, he slid the door open and stepped inside. The room was dark save for a single candle burning in a holder near the sleeping mat. Masahiro lay on his back, eyes already opening at the sound of the door, a warrior's instinctive alertness even in rest. But before he could do more than register the presence of an intruder, Takashi was upon him, one hand clamped firmly over the samurai's mouth, the other pressing the point of his knife against the man's throat. "Make no sound," Takashi whispered, "or it will be your last." Masahiro's eyes widened in the candlelight, fury and shock warring in their depths. He was younger than Takashi had expected, perhaps 25, with the pampered good looks of nobility marred only by a puckered scar that ran from his right eye to his jawline. His hand had instinctively moved toward his sword, but found only empty air. The weapon was on its stand, just out of reach. "You know why I am here," Takashi continued, his voice low but clear. "The girl, Akemi. The fisherman, Kenji. Their blood is on your hands." Recognition dawned in Masahiro's eyes, followed by a contemptuous narrowing. Even with a blade at his throat, the young lord managed to convey disdain. "I'm going to remove my hand," Takashi said. "If you call for your guards, you will die before they reach this room. Do you understand?" A slight nod, as much as the pressure of the knife would allow. Takashi slowly lifted his hand from Masahiro's mouth, keeping the blade steady at his throat. "Who are you?" Masahiro hissed, his voice carefully controlled despite his obvious rage. "Some relative of the fisherman? Or perhaps you fancied the girl yourself?" "I am no one," Takashi replied, "a traveler who witnessed your idea of justice." "Justice?" Masahiro's lip curled. "The girl was promised to me. She and her lover dishonored that promise, dishonored the agreement between her family and the Koda clan. Their punishment was deserved." "A punishment you carried out personally?" "Of course. A samurai does not delegate matters of honor." There was pride in his voice, as if he expected Takashi to understand, even approve of such reasoning. "And now you return to punish the village for my actions," Takashi said, "for removing the girl's body from public display." Surprise flickered across Masahiro's features, quickly masked. "You admit it, then? You're the one who took her down." "I gave her a proper burial, yes. The boy had nothing to do with it." Takashi applied slightly more pressure with the knife, drawing a thin line of blood along Masahiro's throat. "Call off your planned retribution against Mizumura. The villagers are innocent." A harsh laugh escaped Masahiro, cut short by the sting of the blade. "You think you can threaten me into leniency? Do you have any idea who I am? What my father would do to this entire region if I were harmed?" "I know exactly who you are," Takashi replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The third son of Lord Koda, not the heir, not even the spare. Just another samurai with a famous family name, trying to prove his worth through cruelty rather than honor. Rage contorted Masahiro's features. "How dare you?" "I dare because I have nothing left to lose," Takashi interrupted, "which makes me far more dangerous than a man like you, who has never known true loss." Something in his tone must have penetrated Masahiro's arrogance, for the younger man fell silent, reassessing the intruder who held him at knife point. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Have its revenge for the girl and her lover, then kill me and be done with it. But know that my death will bring the full might of the Koda clan down upon Mizumura. Every man, woman, and child will suffer for your actions." It was exactly the threat Takashi had anticipated, and exactly why he had not simply killed Masahiro outright, though justice might have demanded it. The cycle of violence and retribution would only continue, with the villagers bearing the brunt of it. "I don't want your death," Takashi said. "I want your word, your oath as a samurai, that you will leave Mizumura in peace. No hostages, no increased tribute, no further examples made of innocent villagers." Disbelief replaced rage in Masahiro's expression. "You break into my room, hold a knife to my throat, insult my honor, and then expect me to give my word? Are you mad?" "Perhaps," Takashi conceded. "But consider your position carefully, Masahiro of the Koda clan. You are alone, unarmed, at my mercy. Your guards cannot hear us. If I wished you dead, you would be already." "Then why this charade?" "Because there is another way, one that preserves your life, your honor, and brings peace to this village." Takashi shifted his weight slightly, maintaining control but allowing Masahiro to see his face more clearly in the candlelight. "Look at me, Masahiro. Do you know who I am?" The young lord studied him, confusion giving way to a dawning recognition. You're Takashi Hideyoshi, the White Fox of Kitakami Province." His voice held a mixture of awe and disbelief. "But you disappeared 5 years ago, after the Battle of Shirakawa. It was said you died there." "Many things are said of the dead that prove untrue," Takashi replied evenly. "Yes, I am, or was, Takashi Hideyoshi, commander of Lord Oda's personal guard, victor of 17 duels, bearer of the Moonlight Blade." He nodded toward his katana, its distinctive hilt now visible in the candlelight. "A name that still carries weight, even after 5 years of absence. What does this matter? You're Ronin now, masterless. Your name means nothing. It means enough that when word spreads of our duel tomorrow, of how the great Masahiro of the Koda clan faced the legendary White Fox in single combat, no one will question your honor or your courage, regardless of the outcome." Understanding slowly dawned on Masahiro's face. "A duel?" "At dawn, by the Torii gate where the girl was hanged, witnessed by your men and the villagers." Takashi allowed the knife to ease away from Masahiro's throat, though he maintained his position of control. "If you win, your reputation will be secured for a generation, the samurai who defeated Takashi Hideyoshi in fair combat." "And if you win?" Masahiro asked, wariness evident in his tone. "Then my dying request will be for clemency toward Mizumura, a request you will grant out of respect for a worthy opponent." Takashi's gaze was unwavering. "Either way, you leave this encounter with your honor enhanced rather than diminished. Your father can only approve of such initiative." Masahiro fell silent, clearly turning the proposal over in his mind, searching for the trap or trick. Finding none, he asked, "Why would you risk your life for this village? For people you don't know?" It was the same question the old woman, Sachiko, had posed the night before. What was worth risking everything for? Takashi still didn't have a complete answer, but he had part of one. "Because someone must," he said simply. "Because the strong have a duty to protect the weak, not exploit them. Because I've spent 5 years walking away from injustice, and I find I can walk no further." A complex emotion crossed Masahiro's face, something akin to recognition, as if he glimpsed, however briefly, a truth he had long ignored in his pursuit of power. Then his expression hardened once more into the arrogant mask of clan nobility. "Very well, Takashi Hideyoshi, I accept your challenge." Dawn, at the Torii gate. A cold smile spread across his features. I hope you've maintained your skills during your years of wandering. I would hate for the legendary white fox to fall too easily to my blade." "Your concern is noted," Takashi replied dryly. He rose in a fluid motion, maintaining a defensive posture, but removing the immediate threat. "Until dawn, then." Masahiro sat up, rubbing his throat where a thin line of blood had dried. "How do you know I won't simply have my men kill you the moment you leave this room?" "Because you're ambitious, not stupid," Takashi answered. "The glory of defeating me in fair combat far outweighs the satisfaction of a dishonorable ambush. And because deep down you still believe yourself to be a true samurai, bound by the code of Bushido." Whether the assessment struck home or not, Masahiro made no move to call for his guards as Takashi backed toward the door. Their eyes remained locked until the last possible moment, mutual assessment passing between them, predator recognizing predator across the divide of years and experience. Then Takashi was gone, slipping through the corridor like a ghost, retracing his steps through the garden and over the wall. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a heavy mist that clung to the ground, obscuring his retreat through the sleeping village back to Kenji's abandoned house. There, in the final hours before dawn, Takashi Hideyoshi prepared for what might be his last duel. He cleaned and oiled his blades with practiced precision, each movement a meditation on the path that had led him to this moment. He thought of the young lovers, Kenji and Akemi, whose deaths had awakened him from 5 years of walking slumber, of the boy Ichiro, who had shown courage beyond his years, of old Sachiko, who still believed in justice despite a lifetime of evidence against its existence. And he thought of himself, the man he had been before disgrace and exile, the Ronin he had become in the years since, and whatever new identity might emerge from the coming confrontation, should he survive it. As false dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, Takashi donned his finest clothes, the formal hakama and kimono he had carried, but rarely worn during his wandering years. He arranged his swords at his hip, with careful attention to their positioning. Then, with a final glance around the simple house that had sheltered him for 2 nights, he stepped out into the misty morning to meet his fate. The villagers of Mizumura gathered in a silent, wary circle around the Torii gate. Summoned by Masahiro's men before first light, they stood in family groups, huddled against the morning chill, their faces masks of controlled fear, as they watched the Koda samurai arrange themselves in a formal line to one side of the ancient gate. Masahiro stood at their center, resplendent in armor bearing the Koda clan crest, his swords gleaming in the diffuse light. He projected absolute confidence, acknowledging the respectful bows of the village elders with casual nods, every inch the young lord secure in his power and position. Takashi approached from the opposite direction, walking the same path he had traveled 2 days before when he first encountered the hanging girl. The mist parted around him as he moved, revealing his solitary figure to the assembled crowd. A murmur ran through the villagers, some recognizing the Ronin who had briefly stayed among them, others noting with surprise the formal attire and dignified bearing that marked him as more than a simple wanderer. Among the crowd, Takashi spotted Ichiro and his family, the boy's eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. Nearby stood old Sachiko, her weathered face impassive, but her gaze knowing as it followed his approach. The headman Takayama looked distinctly uncomfortable, caught between his Koda overlords and this unexpected disruption to their authority. Takashi came to a stop opposite Masahiro, the Torii gate between them, the same gate from which Akemi's body had hung as a warning. Now the site of a confrontation that would determine Mizumura's fate. "Takashi Hideyoshi," Masahiro announced, his voice carrying clearly to the assembled crowd, "once known as the White Fox of Kitakami, now Ronin. You have challenged me to single combat, as is your right under the Warrior's Code. I, Masahiro of the Koda clan, accept your challenge." A wave of shock passed through the villagers at the mention of Takashi's name. The White Fox was a legend, even in this remote region. Stories of his swordsmanship and tactical brilliance had spread throughout the provinces during the wars. That such a figure stood before them now, preparing to duel for their village's fate, seemed impossible, like a tale from ancient times suddenly made flesh. "Let it be known," Masahiro continued, playing to the audience with practiced ease, "that should Takashi Hideyoshi prevail, the Koda clan will consider the matter of the village's recent transgressions to be settled in full. No further reparation will be demanded. Relief flickered across many faces in the crowd, quickly suppressed lest it be interpreted as disloyalty to their Coda protectors. Takashi noted the reaction, taking a measure of satisfaction in this small victory, regardless of the duel's outcome. "And should you prevail?" Takashi asked, his voice calm and carrying. Masahiro smiled thinly. "Then I will consider your intervention in clan matters to be fully addressed, with no consequences for Mizumura beyond their usual obligations." It was, Takashi had to admit, a fair response, and likely more generous than Masahiro would have offered without the night's confrontation. Perhaps the young lord was not entirely lost to honor after all. "Then let us begin," Takashi said, moving to one side of the Torii gate as Masahiro did the same, creating a clear space for their encounter. They faced each other across 10 paces of mist-dampened ground, each assessing the other with the practiced eye of experienced warriors. Masahiro was younger, perhaps faster, and had not spent the last 5 years avoiding combat. But Takashi had faced more duels, survived more battles, and carried the weight of experience that no amount of training could provide. A tense silence fell over the gathering. Even the birds seemed to hold their songs as the two samurai settled into their opening stances. Masahiro adopted an aggressive posture, sword held high in preparation for a powerful downward strike. Takashi chose a more defensive position, blade angled to protect his core while allowing for quick counterattacks. Time stretched, neither man rushing the engagement. This was not a battlefield melee, but a formal duel, a test of skill, patience, and spirit, as much as physical prowess. The first move would set the tone for the entire encounter. Masahiro broke first, his youth and temperament driving him forward with a swift, powerful attack. His blade cut through the morning mist with deadly precision, aiming for Takashi's left shoulder, a strike designed to disable rather than kill outright, allowing for an extended demonstration of his superiority. Takashi read the attack before it was halfway complete, shifting his weight slightly to let the blade pass within a hair's breadth of his body. He countered with a controlled thrust that forced Masahiro to break his forward momentum and defend. They separated, reset, and engaged again, and again. Each exchange lasted mere seconds, but contained dozens of micro-decisions, adjustments, and counter-adjustments. To the untrained observers, it might have appeared as a beautiful but incomprehensible dance. To the Coda samurai watching, it was a masterclass in swordsmanship from two highly skilled practitioners. Masahiro was indeed talented, more so than Takashi had anticipated. His technique was excellent, his timing impeccable. But as the duel progressed, subtle differences emerged. Masahiro fought to win, to dominate, to prove his superiority. Takashi fought with a clarity of purpose that transcended personal victory. He fought for Mizumura, for the memory of Kenji and Akemi, for a conception of honor that had been buried but not destroyed during his years of wandering. 5 minutes into the duel, both men were breathing hard, each having scored minor successes but no decisive advantage. Masahiro's confidence had given way to intense concentration as he realized the Ronin was every bit the swordsman legend had claimed. Takashi, for his part, felt the familiar rhythm of combat awakening muscle memory long dormant, his body responding with the fluid precision that had once earned him his fearsome reputation. "You fight well for a man who has spent years avoiding his true nature," Masahiro said during a brief pause in their engagement, his voice pitched low enough that only Takashi could hear. "And you fight with more skill than your reputation suggested," Takashi replied evenly. "A pity you've used that skill in service to cruelty rather than justice." Anger flashed in Masahiro's eyes, a momentary loss of the perfect control a samurai strives to maintain. He attacked again, his strikes coming faster now, more aggressive, seeking to overwhelm rather than outmaneuver. Takashi gave ground deliberately, letting Masahiro expend energy on increasingly forceful attacks. It was a dangerous strategy. One missed parry could mean death, but it played to his strengths of patience and endurance against the younger man's power and speed. The duel had drawn out longer than either man had likely expected. Sweat dampened their clothes despite the cool morning air, and their breathing had grown labored. Still, neither showed signs of yielding or making a crucial mistake. Then, as they reset after another exchange, Masahiro's foot slipped slightly on the dew-wet grass. It was a tiny error, barely perceptible, but in a contest between masters, such minute details determined outcomes. Takashi saw the opening and acted with the instant decision-making that had once made him legendary. Not a full attack that Masahiro could still counter despite his momentary imbalance, but a precise, controlled strike to the wrist of his sword hand. Blood sprayed in a thin arc as Takashi's blade found its mark. Masahiro's sword dropped from suddenly nerveless fingers, landing with a dull thud on the soft ground. The younger samurai staggered back a step, clutching his wounded wrist, shock evident on his face. Takashi pressed his advantage, bringing his sword to rest lightly against Masahiro's throat. An echo of their position from the previous night, but now witnessed by dozens of observers. "Yield," Takashi said, his voice carrying just far enough for the closest observers to hear. Rage and humiliation warred in Masahiro's expression. For a moment, it seemed he might refuse, might choose death over the dishonor of defeat. But something in Takashi's steady gaze, perhaps recognition of the mercy being offered, perhaps simple self-preservation, reached him. "I yield," he said, the words clearly costing him more than the wound to his wrist. Takashi lowered his sword and stepped back, offering a formal bow to his defeated opponent. The gesture, acknowledging Masahiro as a worthy adversary deserving of respect despite his loss, was both politically astute and genuinely meant. Masahiro had fought well, with skill if not wisdom. After a moment's hesitation, Masahiro returned the bow, though less deeply. "You have won fairly, Takashi Hideyoshi. As agreed, the matter of Mizumura's indiscretions is settled." He straightened, his face composed once more into aristocratic hauteur despite the blood still dripping from his wrist. "The Koda clan honors its commitments, as does Takashi Hideyoshi," he replied. "Mizumura remains under Koda protection, and I continue my journey, our business concluded." It was a public script that allowed both men to save face. Masahiro acknowledging his defeat while maintaining his clan's authority, Takashi claiming victory while assuring the Koda heir that he posed no ongoing threat to their interests in the region. The Koda samurai moved forward to attend to their wounded lord, carefully respectful of Takashi as they did so. The villagers remained silent, seemingly unable to process what they had witnessed or its implications for their future. As Masahiro was led away toward the headman's house for treatment of his wound, he paused, looking back at Takashi with an expression that mixed resentment with reluctant respect. "We will meet again, White Fox." "Perhaps," Takashi acknowledged, "though I hope under better circumstances for both of us." A ghost of a smile touched Masahiro's lips. "Better for me, certainly." Then he was gone, surrounded by his men, his authority diminished but not destroyed by the morning's events. The villagers dispersed slowly, stealing glances at Takashi as they returned to their homes and fields. Some bowed subtly as they passed. Others kept their eyes carefully averted, uncertain of their position in relation to this unexpected champion. Only Ichiro approached directly, his young face alight with admiration. "That was amazing, Hideyoshi-sama. You defeated him so easily." "Not easily," Takashi corrected, sheathing his sword with hands that trembled slightly from exertion. "And not completely. Remember this, Ichiro. In matters of power and politics, victory is rarely absolute. We've won Mizumura a reprieve, not freedom." "But you'll stay and protect us now, won't you?" the boy asked eagerly. "You could teach the men to defend themselves and—" "No, Ichiro," Takashi interrupted gently. "I cannot stay. My presence would only draw more attention to Mizumura, perhaps from those even more dangerous than the Koda clan." Disappointment clouded the boy's face. "Then you're leaving? Today?" "Soon. There are a few matters I must attend to first." Takashi placed a hand on Ichiro's shoulder. "But know this. What you did, helping me when others would have looked away, took real courage. Honor isn't found in titles or clan names, but in actions taken when there is every reason to do nothing." The boy straightened under this praise, his disappointment giving way to solemn pride. "I won't forget you, Hideyoshi-sama." "Nor I you, Ichiro of Mizumura," Takashi replied with genuine warmth. "Now go to your family. They'll be concerned after this morning's events." As Ichiro hurried away, Takashi found himself alone beneath the Torii gate, the mist beginning to burn away under the strengthening morning sun. He touched the weathered wood of the gate's crossbeam, the same beam from which Akimi's body had hung 2 days earlier. "It's done," he said softly, uncertain if he was addressing the girl's spirit, himself, or simply the indifferent universe. Not perfect justice, perhaps, but something close enough to ease your passing. No answer came, of course, but as Takashi turned to leave, he noticed a single red maple leaf drifting down through the still air to land precisely where he had first seen the girl's body. Coincidence, surely, yet he found comfort in it nonetheless. His path forward was unclear. He remained Ronin, masterless, his brief resurgence as the White Fox likely to complicate rather than simplify his future journeys. But for the first time in 5 years, he felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. There were other villages like Mizumura, other people caught between power and powerlessness, the other injustices that could be addressed by one man willing to stand against the tide. Takashi Hideyoshi walked away from the Torii gate with measured steps, his back straight, his gaze clear. The mist had lifted, revealing the path ahead in all its uncertainty and promise. If this tale of a Ronin finding renewed purpose in defending the defenseless has touched your heart, I hope you'll consider sharing it with others who understand that sometimes the most heroic journeys begin with a single act of compassion.